Somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, a man buried a treasure chest worth over $2 million, gold coins, artifacts, emeralds, and more. And to find it, he published a cryptic poem with only 24 lines decoding its secret location. On today's episode, we're following a trail of riddles, rumors, and real-life gold. In 2010, eccentric art dealer Forrest Fenn launched maybe the greatest treasure hunt of the 21st century. People quit their job, ruined their marriages, some even tragically lost their lives searching for it. And today, we're retracing that obsession in a rare 1992 BMW 525ix touring. Over 2,000 miles on forgotten roads Fenn may himself have explored. Along the way, we'll break down the poem, decode the clues of his memoir, and explore some of the most overlooked hiding places. But this isn't just about the gold, it's about why Fenn hid it, to spark adventure, to get people into the wild. And we're setting out to prove this rad era wagon is the perfect companion for a treasure hunt of epic proportions. How close can we get to where X truly marks the spot? Let's find out. If you love adventures, the outdoors, the unexpected, and more, consider subscribing because life's too short for boring cars. This granite silver metallic Swiss market touring survived 2.5 decades before it landed in the States. And then I made one of the worst decisions I've ever made, and I bought it. And the one thing that we weren't able to do before we leave on our trip was repair the air conditioning. But I have a plan for that. So in the past in these episodes, we've always had to go lean and mean. Well, because we have a wagon, we can live in style for the next 7 days. We're gonna try to fit all of this in here, which I think will fit with room to spare because it's a touring, and we're gonna get on the road to Santa Fe. Fighting the late summer heat, we blaze south from Denver to Santa Fe. With the car appearing to be in good working order despite the lack of air conditioning, we hoped it would hold up for the long journey ahead. We wanted to start as close as possible to the Artist Square, but since there were no downtown campsites, we found the next best thing. Dude, this is awesome. Tomorrow, we'd start our journey in the vibrant, artistic city where Forrest Fenn was a staple for decades. After serving in the Vietnam War as an F-100 pilot, Fenn returned to the States and became a successful art dealer. In 1988, he was diagnosed with cancer and sold his gallery. Believing it was the end, he committed to dying while clutching a chest of treasure in a special spot that would be his final resting place. When he unexpectedly beat the illness, the allure of an elaborate hunt endured, and in 2010 he published his memoir containing clues to the treasure. For the next 10 years, he orchestrated the unsanctioned hunt until the treasure was discovered in 2020, just months before he passed away at the age of 90. The next morning, we set out for a local coffee and breakfast tacos to start the day off strong. Then we dove into downtown to dig up any intel we could find on Fenn and gather last-minute treasure hunting essentials. What better way to channel your inner treasure hunter than with this Indiana Jones hat? Or is it the guy from Jurassic Park? I don't think either one of them was wearing a blip shift shirt. Here we are in front of Fenn's gallery, Nedra Mattiucci. This is where he started, so this is where we're gonna start. And I think the one thing we've kind of learned, he was an extremely controversial figure. The minute you bring up his name, people kind of take a step back and like look over their shoulder. The best advice we've got is to leave sleeping dogs lay. My basic operational principles are just three things: safe, legal, respectful. It brought a lot of people who weren't fluent, who didn't have etiquette of how to operate in the backcountry into the backcountry. So that's got to be an underlying tone. So let's try to figure out what the first stop would be. At the time that he hid the treasure, he was 80. It was roughly 40 to 50 pounds. Based on other things we learned, you could carry it and it's not buried. Things that I take away from this are there's an underlying theme of water. We know from the search area that it's north of Santa Fe. The closest river is the Rio Grande. We'll hit the road, we'll get out of town, and we'll head north. Before hitting the road, we mustered the courage to speak to the current owners of Fenn's gallery, who were nothing but kind and gracious and happy to let us look around. Our experience here is completely opposite of what we expected. We were kind of terrified to even make ourselves known, but this used to be Fenn's gallery, and then it was sold to Nedra Mattiucci, and she could not have been more hospitable. But they did say, like, when a treasure hunter walked through the door, they could pick them immediately. Some of the more extreme examples were one guy walked in with a Geiger counter and he was trying to conceal it, so he was like doing that. And then they caught another like father-son duo where the sons were back here in the gallery and the father was gonna throw the metal detector out. And she said she thought like what lured people here was the fact that he was 80 and he maybe couldn't go very far and that there was water. So everybody thought the treasure was hidden in the pond here, the koi pond. So thankfully those days are gone. Dude, it's like the Garden of Eden. You can pick plums out of the tree and eat them. What a wonderful spot. It is very humbling. That seems to be a reoccurring theme that's emerging through this journey. Ah, yes.
What is a cool suit?
The cool suit is something you use in racing because the race car is just brutally hot inside. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's nice. As we headed north, we deliberated over some of the criticisms, controversies, and downsides of Fenn's outlandish idea.
So we're just reading an article. There was a gentleman who was very sure that he had found it at a place in Yellowstone, and then called into question speculation that maybe Forrest had moved it.
One of the broader criticisms of Fenn has been that the whole point of the treasure was to self-promote his books, narcissistic tinge.
Also, a Virginian woman seeking Fenn's treasure prompted 3 rescue missions this summer in Wyoming. Somebody's body washed up near here in the Rio Grande, and then people would just ask him to call it off. So you have people out there who wouldn't normally be out there.
I mean, we all make mistakes. That's what makes us human. So I don't think we should diminish that, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I'm the pilot in command of my decisions, and I need to be accountable for those decisions. And that's said from somebody that makes a lot of bad decisions.
I mean, we are sitting here right now.
Chasing a treasure that's already been found. It's the first real test of the all-wheel drive wagon being off-road. I need to, at all costs, preserve the drivetrain and the oil pan, and picking a surgical line is definitely of importance, but like, it's amazing how great the suspension is, even on the washboard. Like, it's better than my truck. It just soaks up the bumps. And then you can totally feel the all-wheel drive like when you start out. So we're off-roading on a very small scale. The treasure hunt didn't hit the mainstream until 2016, when the first death was recorded near Taos along the Rio Grande. A total of 5 people lost their lives during the decade-long hunt. At one point, the New Mexico State Police implored Fenn to call it off. His standard reply was, if someone drowns in a swimming pool, we shouldn't drain the pool, we should teach people to swim. Sadly, the Rio Grande claimed 2 separate lives over the years that people were hunting for the treasure. One of them was just downstream of here at the Taos Junction Bridge, a man from Grand Junction whose car was found and his body was recovered downstream. The great equalizer that the outdoors are. It's one thing to think about that in abstract terms. It's different if you're experiencing it, and for the family members of those people, that's an experience that's gonna stick. At the end of the day, I think it's better to seek and discover an adventure than to live your life in fear. With daylight fading, we had a quick meal in Taos and set out to find a campsite for the night. But after finding a tent-only site, we had the entire bluff all to ourselves. As I've gotten older, and if you can bring it, and you don't need to be kind of lean and mean, there's no reason not to be comfortable. The next morning, we awoke to a blazing sunrise that revealed the true majesty of what had been hiding in the darkness. The next stanza says, "From there, it's no place for the meek. The end is ever drawing nigh. There'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high." We know from subsequent interviews that the treasure wasn't buried, that he said it's above 5,000 feet, which is pretty much anywhere north of Santa Fe, but it was also below 10,200 feet. Could also be a clue to these kind of headwaters of the Rio Grande. On the way out of the park, we made friends with a weary traveler. Tens of thousands of tarantulas migrate from New Mexico to Colorado every year. So that they swarm from the San Luis Valley here up into Colorado. So cool, isn't it, to see a tarantula out in the wild? Hypothesizing that it was unlikely Fenn would hide the treasure so close to Santa Fe, we crossed the border north into Colorado. At breakfast, we brainstormed about what it must have been like for an 80-year-old man to carry a 40-pound chest of treasure into the Rockies, perhaps in a station wagon of his own. Man, this car is just amazing. It soaks up the miles. We've driven 1,300 kilometers so far since we started. If I slide this, somehow that still works. So here we are outside of South Fork. We're definitely in waters high. Our elevation here is probably around 7,500 feet. And certainly looking around, there's an old railroad bridge here that crosses the river, just heavy loads and water high. So perhaps we should explore that area and also conduct refreshment in the process.
It might seem funny that we're looking under a random bridge, but that's how people had to look.
I mean, I've flown over the West for 20 years in the airliner and the small plane and looked down. But then you get on the ground and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna drive, I'll drive there. No big deal. Oh, it's 3 hours away and we have 2 hours of daylight. The scale of things out here is fantastic, but you definitely have to respect it. Here is a tributary to the Rio Grande in Clear Creek, and there's a series of waterfalls here as they cascade down. If I were gonna hide a treasure, this would certainly be on my short list. The pros are it's accessible by an 80-year-old man carrying a 40-pound box, but the cons are it might be a little too accessible. But there's another waterfall up the way that's a little bit harder to get to. Arriving at the headwaters of the Rio Grande, we stopped to discuss what river system to search next. You think of the Rio Grande River, that's probably not the image that comes to mind, but that is the headwaters of the Rio Grande. And they go even further up into the San Juans, and all of the summer crowds are gone. And other than the occasional hunter, there's just not a lot of people up here. I probably would have spent some time here if I was searching in earnest. But the beauty of this spot is there doesn't need to be a treasure to come here, because here we are. We literally walked out of the woods into a painting.
So if this is the end of the Rio Grande, we kind of need a new body of water, don't we?
We haven't deep dived into people's solves for this and their logic and where they went, but it just doesn't seem like this is far enough from Santa Fe. Dinosaur, Dutch John, Flaming Gorge, that's not an insignificant distance from here. This is one of the best driving roads in Colorado, and the beauty of the E34 wagon is satisfy our driving enthusiast needs while also pursuing our quest deeper into the wilderness. Climbing into the eastern San Juan Mountains, the 525 carved up the winding roads with poise. Being immersed in the golden leaves and warm sunlight felt like a moment Fenn may have approved of. Fueled up and realizing the immense distance of our journey north, we decided to push into the night. Arriving late in the northern Colorado town of Meeker, we decided to skip setting up the campsite and take one of the last rooms available. Seal, gas cap.
Yeah.
The door's not latching, and I kind of wonder With E36s, it's often temperature related. I call that crisis averted for now. Shit, that's the only thing that happens to us. Well, and clearly we have a leaky gas tank seal. Taking a moment to explore a local antique store, we hit the road for what would be our longest and perhaps most desolate day yet. There's not a lot of roads I haven't been on, but this road going west out of Meeker, northwest, has been absolutely amazing. And there's no one out here. You know, any BMW wagon is a dude magnet. I'm surprised the dude hasn't just flushed himself out of these bushes right here to be like, that's an awesome car. There were infinite places Fenn could have hidden the treasure within his map. However, the clues did point to a body of water that was not too far, but too far to walk, which by our interpretation could have meant anything within a short scramble of the road. This is Vernal Falls. It's definitely off the beaten path. And this is a bit of an oasis in the middle of a desert. You certainly can't just walk down here. You have to crawl over stuff a little bit. You know, the problem is the water's really low right now, and you can see the natural path of the high water mark. The next stanza, which we'll talk about, talks about finding a blaze. And that's kind of the thing that's been missing, is we haven't found a blaze. What does that mean? And I don't know. Hundreds of thousands of people interpreted the poem over the decade that the treasure remained hidden. The majority of treasure seekers were casual, using the hunt as an excuse to explore places off the beaten path they may have never gone otherwise. As we ventured farther off the grid, we were the only car on the road for hours in this desolate stretch of northwestern Colorado. Whatever animal completed the circle of life there couldn't have picked a better place to do it. We know that that was Fenn's original intent, was to find a place he could go that was peaceful, that he could clutch his treasure box, and eventually we'd find a skeleton holding a treasure box. I can certainly relate to the feeling of knowing if I was terminally ill and the outcome wasn't looking good, I certainly would want to have some say in how I completed my journey on this earth. And if that was in a place like this, treasure box or not, what a fantastic way to return to the earth. Some of the more serious treasure hunters would work on what they call solves, a logical attempt to translate the riddle. But whether you were serious or not about finding the treasure, on this road, hundreds of miles away from any major civilization, we could see what Fenn meant by getting out there in our own way. Though we were hoping to get a good campsite outside of Jackson, it wasn't looking good. I'm not very optimistic we're gonna get a spot, especially being that we don't have the capability to go that deep. Our friend James from Michigan has offered us a spot. Carefully four-wheeling our low-slung wagon over the trail, we doubled up at a site and quietly set up camp. I wouldn't describe last night as restful. With the winds, walking up to this view this morning makes it all worth it. As amazing as the beautiful Tetons were, through the gift of intuition and hindsight, we knew the treasure was found in another national park to the north. Enjoying the charm of Jackson, we stopped at a breakfast spot to plan our search in one of the most heavily trafficked national parks in the country. Yesterday we were talking about cognitive bias. So I have a natural aversion to crowds, so when I interpret the treasure where it would be, my thought would be that it would be someplace undervisited, unpopulated, off the beaten path. The other way to interpret that, though, is the where warm waters halt line. That would be here along the Firehole River, and that's a main thoroughfare of the park. Taking a minute to enjoy the view, We quickly realized what a mistake it was not to reserve a campsite for the night. Thankfully, just outside of the park, we found a spot that would take us and allow one last look at Fenn's poem. This is interesting. I give you title to the gold, and we almost wonder if that's not a legal statement, because technically speaking, from a legality standpoint, anything abandoned in the park actually becomes government property. So maybe he put that in there to defend the fact that if someone found it, they would legally own it. We'll say the guy who found it, one of the primary things that he used in his hunt was to only use sole source information. But we were able to get in touch with a treasure hunter who had a solve that he swears would have taken him to the treasure.
And I had read an article on an airplane, it was in a magazine. Well, there's a lot of stories in all three of his books. And he talked about the Firehole River was one of the places he loved to go swim, and that's got to be the starting spot. Now, I had it narrowed down probably the size of a football field or so. I had a wedding to go to on June 5th of 2020, and I thought, oh, the treasure's been there 10 years. It's still going to be there after that. And basically, the next day, I get all these text messages. Was it you? Was it you? We were like, oh my God, we knew where it was, but it's all right because we still had a lot of fun.
The next morning, we woke up to frost on the wagon, which required heating the door latch again to make it close. Fenn was a Vietnam War fighter pilot who carried a maverick attitude throughout his life. As a child in the 1930s and 40s, he spent countless seasons fishing here. Yellowstone is the world's oldest national park with an area larger than Rhode Island and Delaware combined. It's located on top of a supervolcano called a caldera and houses more than 10,000 geothermal features, accounting for half of the world's active geysers. Of course it's in Yellowstone. It's one of the most magical places in the world. Take that a little bit further, and everybody that was seriously hunting this treasure went way deeper than the poem. People had to dig deeper, they had to read his books, they had to listen to his life story. What a magical time it must have been for Forrest to come here as a child and then come here later after his tour in Vietnam in the 70s and 80s, before the national parks had the level of traffic that they do now. We're in this geyser basin which feeds into the headwaters of the Firehole River. Where warm waters halt certainly could be somewhere along where the Firehole River confluences and becomes the Madison River. So I think that's where we'll head to next. Aside from the geothermal activity, Yellowstone is home to the largest concentration of mammals in the lower 48 states, including the iconic bison, which have lived here since prehistoric times. No trip to Yosemite, no trip to Yellowstone would be complete without seeing Old Faithful. What's crazy is just how big Yellowstone National Park is. We've been driving for over an hour and we haven't even made it to the farthern end of the southern loop. And some people hypothesize that the treasure was hidden on one of these islands out in the lake. I don't subscribe to that theory. It doesn't jive with everything else we've heard. We followed the river downstream and here we are. And of course it was here. If you read his books, if you listened to him talk about where he fished as a child, about a special place that he held dear, this is that spot. So let's go back to our mission. Our code was safe, legal, respectful. We don't want to attract more people to this spot. The other people have done that. We don't need to do that. But at the same time, like, we need something we can touch, like something that's truly special to this place. So let's see what we got. Gold nugget, 48 gram, from Fenn's treasure chest. We got this from our friend Larry on eBay, that this 48-gram gold nugget spent 10 years buried in an ancient treasure chest across that river. And in those 10 years, hundreds of thousands of people ventured out into the world, into the West, to try to find this, and to do so, to complete that journey in comfort and style, while delivering that old school driving experience that defines the golden era of these vehicles. If we're only here in a glimpse of space and time, how do we come to a place like this and preserve it? How do we leave no trace? One guy found the treasure, but another couple 100,000 people got to have their own adventure. And maybe some of those people wouldn't have had it otherwise. So the fact that he did that, the fact that yes, some people lost their lives, well, it doesn't diminish the loss of those families. But at the same time, a much larger swath of people had a great adventure, had a great story to tell. And if we've done that for you, then we've satisfied our mission, and we've had a lot of fun in the process.
What did you think of Fenn's treasure? Did he take it too far, or did his good intentions outweigh the bad? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy our channel, the best way you can support us is to like, share, and subscribe. We'll look forward to seeing you next time on Life's Too Short for Boring Cars.